I had always thought that when the time came, I would be included in my son's life events. After all, I had been there for every major milestone in his life. His first day of school, his graduation, the struggles, the triumphs, and the moments in between. I had always been his support system, the one he could count on when the world seemed too much. So when James and Emily, his new wife, announced their big anniversary celebration, I was overjoyed. I had helped them plan their wedding years ago, pouring love and effort into making it a beautiful occasion. And now, this anniversary would be no different. I couldn't wait to be part of their special day. At first, everything seemed so promising. They had decided to throw a big party, and James was so excited about it. "Mum, we're planning something big for our anniversary. It's going to be an amazing celebration," he told me over the phone, sounding as eager as I had ever heard him. "You know I'll help with whatever you need," I replied enthusiastically. "It's your anniversary. Let me know if there's anything I can do. I can't wait." Over the next few weeks, I waited eagerly for the invitation. After all, it made perfect sense, right? I was his mother. Of course, I would be invited. So many of the family friends would be there. It would be a night of joy, laughter, and shared memories. I thought of all the times I had supported him, and his marriage, all the times I had gone out of my way to be the one constant in their lives. How could they not include me? But as the days went on, I began to notice a strange silence creeping in. James didn't call to give me the party details, as he had promised. I tried reaching out a few times, just to ask about the date and the venue, but each time I got an excuse. "Mum, things are crazy with the planning. I'll send you the info soon." And soon never came. As the weeks turned into a month, I started to feel a sense of discomfort settling in. Surely, this was just an oversight, I convinced myself. Maybe they had been so busy with preparations that they forgot to send out the invitations. I couldn't imagine them excluding me on purpose. After all, I was his mother. No one would do that, right? But the silence grew louder, and with it, my doubts grew. I had been excluded from family events before, but never on this scale. I thought back to the times I had made sacrifices to make sure everything went smoothly for them, the countless hours I had spent helping them build their home together, the advice I had given. I had given so much, and now I was left out. The thought of it stung, but I tried to brush it aside, telling myself that maybe I was just being paranoid. Then came the moment that shattered everything. It was a Friday evening, and I was sitting in my living room, flipping through a magazine, when my phone buzzed with a message from Emily. I hadn't heard from her in a while, and I hoped that this message might finally be the one with the party. Details I had been waiting for. I opened the text, my excitement building. But when I read the words, my heart dropped to my stomach. "Mom, I'm so sorry, but we're keeping the anniversary party small. It's just for close friends and immediate family. Unfortunately, we aren't able to invite you this time. I hope you understand." The words on the screen blurred for a moment as I tried to process what I had just read. I blinked, rereading the message over and over, as if the words would somehow change. "We're keeping the party small. Not able to invite you." I sat there, completely stunned, the phone slipping from my hand as I absorbed the impact of those words. I felt as though the ground beneath me had shifted. How could this be happening? I had raised James, supported him through every hardship, cheered for him when he succeeded, and now I was being told I wasn't even important enough to be at his anniversary party. I felt a deep ache, a hollow emptiness that settled in my chest. I wanted to scream, to ask why, to understand what had happened to the bond we once shared. But all I could do was stare at the message on the screen. The pain of rejection was unlike anything I had ever felt. In that moment, I realized that I had become nothing more than an afterthought in their lives. I had always assumed I would be a part of their celebrations, a constant in their world, but now I was being told that I wasn't even worthy of an invitation to an event that celebrated their love, the love I had nurtured, the love I had helped them build. I tried to remain calm, to make sense of it. Maybe this was just a misunderstanding. Maybe it was just a slip-up, a mistake they didn't mean, that deep down I knew better. This wasn't an accident. They had chosen not to invite me. They had made a conscious decision to exclude me from their celebration, and I was left standing on the outside, wondering what had happened to the family I had worked so hard to create. I immediately picked up the phone to call James, but as I dialed his number, I hesitated. What could I possibly say? How could I express the hurt, the disbelief that I felt without sounding petty or demanding? I couldn't understand why he had let this happen, why he hadn't stepped in and made. Sure, I was included, but what I realized in that moment was that it didn't matter. I wasn't invited. I wasn't wanted. I sat in silence for what felt like an eternity, the weight of the realization settling heavily in my heart. I had been replaced, discarded, as if I were no longer important. What had I done to deserve this? As the evening went on, I tried to push aside the ache in my chest, but it wasn't easy. I had spent years doing everything for James, everything for his happiness, for his future, and now, in the blink of an eye, I was nothing. I was invisible. The next few days were filled with an overwhelming mix of emotions. I tried to focus on work, on other aspects of my life, but nothing seemed to matter. How could it, when the one person I had given so much to, the one person I had loved unconditionally, had left me behind? I tried to convince myself that it didn't matter, that I should just let it go. But it did matter. It mattered more than I could put into words. The days after receiving Emily's message felt like an emotional haze. I tried to distract myself with routine tasks, work, errands, and small household projects, but nothing could shake the sense of emptiness that clung to me. I kept replaying the moment I read Emily's message over and over in my mind, like a broken record that wouldn't stop playing. Every time I thought I could move past it, the words would resurface, dragging me back into the same pit of hurt. We're keeping. It's small, not able to invite you. The harshness of it all settled into my bones. I couldn't help but think about how much I had done for James over the years. How many times had I been there for him? How many sacrifices had I made, all for the sake of his happiness? And now, in one simple text, it was clear that all of that love and effort had meant nothing. I wasn't even good enough to be invited to his anniversary celebration. My mind swirled with thoughts of how things had shifted between us over time. I had been so focused on supporting him, giving him everything I had, that I hadn't noticed how he had slowly distanced himself. How had this happened? I couldn't stop the quiet, painful whispers in my mind. Had I done something wrong? Had I been too much of a presence in his life? Was I overbearing, intrusive? The questions rattled in my head, that the more I thought about them, the more I realized that I had done nothing but love him, and love him well. But love, it seemed, wasn't always enough. It wasn't just about the party. It was about everything leading up to that moment. The last few months had been a blur of quick conversations, late-night calls that barely touched the surface of real connection. James had always been my son, my pride and joy, but now he was slipping away, inch by inch, and I didn't know how to stop it. I spent long hours reflecting, pacing through my house, wrestling with the weight of it all. In the quiet, I realized that something had shifted inside me. deep within my soul. This wasn't just about a party or about feeling left out. It was about the realization that I had been living my life for everyone else. I had spent so many years focusing on James's needs, on his happiness, on ensuring that he never felt neglected or abandoned, that I had completely neglected my own needs, my own happiness. I had erased myself in the process. And now, when I needed validation, respect, and love the most, I found myself with nothing but emptiness. This realization stung harder than I expected, but it was also freeing. I had spent my life running after approval and appreciation from others. First, it was from my parents, then my husband, and finally from James. And in the process, I had lost myself. I had lost my sense of self-worth. And now, I was at the mercy of the very people I had given everything to. I couldn't keep doing this. It wasn't just that I was hurt or angry at James. It was that I had finally woken up to the fact that I had allowed myself to be treated this way for far too long. I had given, and all I had to show for it was a broken heart and an empty space where my sense of identity used to be. That night, after an exhausting internal battle, I made a decision, a bold decision, a decision that I knew would change everything. I had to take my life back. I had to stop living for everyone else and start living for me. I thought about my financial situation. I had worked hard, built up a small but comfortable nest egg over the years, and I was finally in a position where I had paid off much of my mortgage. But in that moment, I realized that I had been prioritizing everything but my own peace of mind. What had I sacrificed all these years for? The financial stability? Sure, that was important. But what good was financial stability if it came at the cost of my happiness, my sense of self-worth? I walked over to my desk, opened my bank app, and stared at the balance in my mortgage account. For years, I had meticulously paid my mortgage, always on time, always making sure that I was financially secure. But now, looking at it, I realized I had been doing this for the wrong reasons. I had spent so much time building a future for others, my son, my family, my husband, that I had forgotten to build a future for myself. With trembling hands, I made the decision. I called the bank and cancelled my next mortgage payment. It wasn't that I didn't have the funds to pay, it was about something deeper. This was my moment of rebellion, of taking control. I was no longer going to stay shackled to a system that had drained me emotionally, mentally, and physically. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of empowerment. The immediate aftermath of my decision was both liberating and terrifying. I knew this would have consequences. James would be furious. Emily would probably never speak to me again. But I didn't care. I was tired of putting everyone else's needs ahead of my own. I was tired of feeling invisible, of being the one who always gave without asking for anything in return. It was time for me to take back my power. I spent the next few days in a haze of mixed emotions. I wasn't sure what my next step would be, but I knew that something needed to change. The feelings of hurt from the party exclusion hadn't disappeared, but they had become less consuming. I realized I had spent far too long living for the approval of others. First my husband, then my son, and now his wife. It was time to start living for myself, to finally stop worrying about whether people loved me or valued me, and start valuing myself. I thought about all the things I had put off for so many years, the dreams I had forgotten, the things I had always wanted to do, but had never found the time for. I used to love painting. I used to be passionate about cooking. I had always wanted to travel but had never taken the time to do so. But now, all of that was going to change. I didn't have to live in the shadow of other people's expectations anymore. I could choose my own path. I began researching art classes in the city, looking for local workshops and painting sessions that I could attend. I dug out my old cookbooks and planned meals for myself, foods I had long forgotten. I began considering the idea of traveling again, something I had always dreamed of but had put off for years. It wasn't just about escaping, it was about reclaiming my joy, my freedom, and my sense of self. But the most important part of this decision wasn't just the external changes I was making. It was the internal shift. I was no longer going to rely on others to define my worth. I had given so much of myself to James, to my husband, and to the people in my life, that I had forgotten how to take care of myself. Now I was learning to prioritize my own needs, to value my own happiness, and to forgive myself for allowing others to dictate my happiness for so long. In the quiet of my home, as I sat with my thoughts, I realized that this decision was the first step in a new journey. A journey where I put myself first. It was terrifying, it was risky, but for the first time in years, it felt right. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew this much. I was no longer going to live in the shadows of others. It was time for me to stand tall, to walk confidently, in my own truth, and to embrace the freedom I had long denied myself. The aftermath of my decision to cancel my mortgage payment was immediate and far-reaching. It wasn't something I had done lightly, and the gravity of my choice settled in like an overwhelming storm. The decision had been one of liberation, but it came with consequences, and I was well aware of that. James didn't call me for days, and when he did, it was with a tone that I could immediately sense was charged with anger. The weight of my actions had clearly hit him, and I wasn't prepared for the emotional fallout that was to come. "Mom, what is going on?" James asked, his voice tight with frustration. "Why would you do something like this? You can't just cancel your mortgage payment like that. What are you thinking?" I stayed calm, despite the waves of guilt that tried to creep in. I had to remind myself that this wasn't about him. It was about me reclaiming my power. I had spent so many years thinking about his happiness, about his future, that I had forgotten my own. This was my time. "James," I said quietly, "this isn't about you or the money. This is about me. I've spent my whole life putting you and your needs first, and now I realize I've neglected myself in the process. I have to do this. I need to do this." There was a pause on the other end of the phone, a long silence that made my stomach churn. When James finally spoke, his voice was softer, but there was still an edge to it. "You don't have to do something drastic like this, Mom. I don't understand. Why can't you just talk to me? Why do you have to go to such extremes?" I could hear the frustration in his words. He didn't get it. He couldn't understand how much I had suffered by keeping my emotions bottled up for so long. By being the silent supporter, always available when needed, but never truly seen for who I was. "I've been talking to you, James," I replied, my voice steady. "But you haven't been listening. You and Emily, you're both so caught up in your lives that you don't see what I've been going through. I'm not some background character in your story. I'm your mother. I deserve respect too." There was another long pause. I could almost hear the wheels turning in his mind. I knew he was angry, but I also knew there was something else there, something he wasn't ready to admit. Guilt? Regret? Perhaps a small sliver of understanding. I didn't know, and I wasn't sure if I even cared anymore. This was my moment. When he finally spoke again, his voice was less charged but more resigned. "I don't know what to say, Mom. I just don't. I'm sorry you feel this way. I really am. But I don't know how to fix this." I couldn't stop. The feeling of sadness that washed over me. How had we come to this? I had poured everything I had into being a good mother, but somehow we were at this crossroads. One where the bond we shared was strained, fragile, and uncertain. I don't know how to fix this either, I said softly. But I can't keep doing this for you anymore, James. I've spent years giving and giving, and I've never asked for anything in return. But now it's my time. And I'm not going to apologize for that. I ended the call without waiting for a response, my heart heavy, but my mind clear. The decision had been made. It was a decision that had been brewing inside me for years. A culmination of all the sacrifices I had made, and the love I had poured out without hesitation. Now, I was finally standing up for myself. I wasn't going to apologize for needing to put myself first. The silence that followed in the days after was deafening. I expected James to reach out, to try to reconcile, to understand what I was going through. But there was nothing. Not a word from him. Emily didn't reach out either, which wasn't entirely surprising. I had expected them both to be upset. But the silence still stung Dot for the first time in years. I didn't feel like I was desperately clinging to something that wasn't there. The guilt I had carried for so long, guilt over my perceived failures as a mother, guilt over my sacrifices, guilt over the love I had given so freely, was beginning to lift. I had been caught in a cycle of pleasing others for so long that I had lost sight of myself. But now, I was taking the first steps to rediscover who I was, beyond the roles of mother, wife, and caretaker. I realized that the process of reclaiming my life wouldn't be easy. It was going to take time, and it was going to require me to face the discomfort of change head-on. I couldn't force James or Emily to understand right away, and I couldn't expect them to change overnight. But what I could do was focus on my own healing, my own growth. The first step was simple. I took a weekend getaway. A solo trip to the coast, where I could clear my head and reconnect with the person I had long forgotten. I rented a small cabin by the ocean, spent the days walking along the beach, and let the sound of the waves calm my racing thoughts. I hadn't realized just how much I had been suffocating until I found that space for myself. I didn't make any grand plans. I didn't try to fill every moment with activity or distraction. I simply existed. For the first time in years, I wasn't worrying about someone else's needs, someone else's expectations. I was allowed to just be, and it felt like a breath of fresh air. When I returned home, I felt different, stronger, more centered. I began to focus more on my own passions. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since my younger years. I enrolled in a local art class, reconnected with old friends, and even considered joining a book club. I began taking little steps to build a life for myself that didn't revolve around others. I started to realize that I wasn't just someone's mother, wife, or friend. I was a person in my own right, with my own desires, dreams, and aspirations. James finally reached out a few weeks later, his tone cautious but apologetic. "Mum, I've been thinking about everything you said. I realize now that I've taken you for granted. I'm sorry. I want to make things right." It wasn't the grand apology I had hoped for, but it was a start. It wasn't about the words he said. It was about the fact that he was willing to take responsibility for his actions, even if it was only a small acknowledgement. I wasn't ready to fully forgive him, not yet. But for the first time, I felt a sense of hope that maybe, just maybe, there was room for healing in our relationship. In the days that followed, I focused on rebuilding. I spent more time doing the things that made me happy. I didn't expect James to fix everything, and I didn't expect Emily to come around. But I was learning to be okay with that. I was learning that my worth didn't depend on their approval or understanding. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was living for myself, not just for others. I was learning to embrace the silence, to embrace the freedom that came with letting go of the need for constant validation. I was finally living for me,